Corinthians, chapters 10 and 11 today. And as we know, Paul has been dealing with the church there. Last week, he was talking about the need for all of us to purify ourselves. And he described that in two fashions. Number one was to turn away from sin and then turn into God. And we all know that's what we need. That's where we need to be. We need to turn into God for everything that we do. In our happy times, in our sad times, in our times of not understanding, we turn into God. And then he talks about how he's speaking with great frankness with the congregation there because they've gone astray. They have been following the smooth talkers, I guess is the way to put it. And he says, you've got to see this for what it is. And then after he finishes that up, he talks about how excited he was to get the good news from Timothy up Titus up in Macedonia about how they had received that third letter, that harsh letter. Not that this letter is not so harsh, because he does get back into it today, making some pretty direct statements, to say the least. But as far as the congregation there goes, majority of them have seen the error of their ways, but there's still those stragglers and those false apostles, as he's talking about it. They're obviously still there because he's directing some of this verbiage to them and to those that are continuing to support him. So that's kind of where we pick up today. And so Paul, once again, he did this earlier in the letter, but he goes back over on it. He's addressing the criticism that they're talking about, and that's kind of the way he starts it out. There's this criticism that they're saying, Paul is so bold when he writes you a letter, but when he's in person, he's a very meek person. He says these harsh things through writing, but when he gets here, he's not about that. And Paul talks about that, and fear not, when I come again, if it's warranted, you're going to get it, right? There's not going to be any meekness. And he talks about how the world wages war, and even these false teachers, their approach to waging war, i.e. comparing themselves to those around them versus comparing themselves to the Scriptures, to God. Isn't that interesting? We like to compare ourselves with those around us because why? We get to choose who we're going to compare ourselves to, right? And but that's not what Paul says you need to do. You need to be comparing yourself against the Scriptures, those expectations that God has for us. That's where we compare. That's what he compares himself to. That's who we need to comparing ourselves to. And then he talks about you people are judging by appearance. Now, we do that, don't we? We do that everywhere we go, all day long. You can run across somebody new, and the way they dress, the way they walk. Isn't it amazing things we can judge on? The way they walk, what they drive, right? What they wear, how they smell, how they talk. I mean, we got all this stuff, right? And if we want to judge somebody, and if 3 out of the 8 we're not impressed with, which ones do we go after? The 5 that don't make any difference, or do we just narrow in on those 3? Yeah, we'll just go after the negative because when we we're family. Let's be honest. When we spend time tearing down our brothers and sisters, or our family members, or friends and cohorts, or someone that you're just judging from a distance, why are we doing that? What are we trying to achieve? What are we doing? We're wanting to build ourselves up. We will tear others down so we can build ourselves up. Okay, for God followers who are told to empty themselves, how much building are we supposed to be doing? We're not in the business of building ourselves up, are we? No, we're in the business of filling ourselves up. God's knowledge, His wisdom, right? And then expressing that and being His hands and feet. It's not about building us up. It's about filling us up and then acting upon it. And so Paul talks about that, and then he goes on, he criticizes the false teachers for comparing themselves to others, and we talked about that a little bit as opposed to the standards. And Paul humbles himself, and he says, I recognize I'm not a trained speaker, but he says, what I do know, I have knowledge of Christ, and Christ is what I teach. Right? So it's maybe not how I present it, but we need to be focusing on what is being presented. Everybody's got their own presentation style. They've got their own vocabulary, whatever else. Last time if you guys came here for entertainment, we're not in the entertainment business, right? We're here to glorify God. And sometimes, just using me as a teacher, every week, every other week, every third week, you get to Patrick who's on medication, right? And so maybe how I say things, or maybe I'm a little harsher than I should be, a little bit more direct, or maybe half the words I can't remember I want to say, and so I'm struggling for words, right? That's probably not pleasant for you. I know, because sometimes I go back and listen to myself and what I said online and thinking, well, that didn't go like I thought it would, right? But the key is, as Christians, we sit back and we take what the teacher is providing, and then what do we do with it? We compare it to the Scriptures, right? Maybe I have a little bit of insight I can share with you and get you to think about something in a unique way, maybe an application. I grew up my entire life listening to teachers who, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, who focused only on knowledge. And throughout different points of my life, I had to ask myself, but what does a Christian look like? What do they do? When I was in those early years of what am I to do and to say that demonstrates I'm a Christian? I mean, I have this knowledge, right? I've built knowledge, I've gathered knowledge, I've studied, but what good is knowledge if it doesn't ooze from my pores? Right? The Bible tells us the demons have knowledge. But if it's not who we are, what of things we do or become, what good is it? I think it's something about a clanging bell or something. Right? And so that's why, and it probably I don't know, maybe you enjoy it or not. That's why I can't end a lesson without talking about application. No one ever talked about application as I was growing up. It was just, here's your knowledge. And I guess they assumed I knew what to do with it. It's not about knowledge. It's about what we do, who we become. And so, anyway, so Paul talks about that, and then he discusses the cost and he's comparing these for hire preachers. Their cost is money out of that congregation's pockets, right? And Paul says, yeah, I got a cost. I didn't charge you a dime, but let me tell you about my cost. Let me tell you about my shipwrecks. Let me tell you about my 40 lashes minus 1 3 times. Let me tell you about my stoning. Let me tell you about my shipwreck. Let me tell you the cost. He takes it totally to the other side. Right? What am I willing to endure to be the hands and feet of God? Wow. Instead of provide me, supplement me, line my pockets, Paul's saying, I'm in jail. Let me tell you cost right here. So anyway, that's where we're going to pick up. Chapters 10 and 11. By the humility and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you, I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold towards you when away. So that's one of those criticisms that these folks are having. Oh, he's so bold when he writes you, but yet when he's face to face, he's timid. I beg you then that when I come, that I may not have to be bold, as I expect to be towards some people who think we live by the standards of this world. So that's that comparison thing that's going on. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish the strongholds. Once again, now what is he talking about? He's talking about prayer. Right? He's talking about faith. These are our weapons. Not the world's weapons. These are our weapons. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. You are judging by appearances. If anyone is confident that they belong to Christ, they should consider again that we belong to Christ just as much as they do. So, Paul's saying, are these people really teaching you Jesus? I taught you Jesus. What are these people teaching you? Right? I mean, they're tearing down Paul. So obviously they're not teaching what Paul is teaching. They're saying how bad Paul is. Otherwise, their speak would be congruent unless they're after self-gain. So even if I boast somewhat freely about the authority of the Lord gave us for building you up rather than tearing you down, I am not ashamed of it. I do not want to seem to be trying to frighten you with my letters, for some say his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person he is unimpressive and he speaks amounts of nothing. Such people should realize that what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. There is not a disconnection, Paul's saying. It's coming. We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves. They are not wise. We, however, will not boast beyond proper limits, but will continue our boasting in the sphere of the service of God himself has assigned to us, a sphere that also includes you. We're not going too far in our boasting, as would be the case if we had not come to you, for we did get as far as you with the gospel of Christ. In other words, what is Paul's boast? I came and I taught you. I presented the gospel to you. That's my boast. Not about who I am or what I've done. Paul's saying, my boast is you. Once again, and we see that earlier in the letter. Neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting for work others have done. Oop, there's a poke. Somebody's boasting about the work that they didn't even do. Our hope is that as your faith continues to grow, our sphere of activity among you will greatly expand so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you. For we do not want to boast about work already done in someone else's territory, but let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. In other words, we don't do the judging, do we? I'm not going to tell you how good I am. The Lord's going to sort this one out. I hope you'll put up with me for a little foolishness. Yes, please put up with me. I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I may present you as a pure virgin to him. But I am afraid that just as Eve was deceived by a serpent cunning, your minds may somewhat have been led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. For if someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from the spirit that you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it easily. Paul went there, he taught the truth, and now they're accepting something. Does this sound like any other letter Paul's going to write? I don't know, like maybe Galatians. How could you turn so fast? You know, you got the sooth talkers in there, and boy, you just chew it, just eat it all up, don't you? I do not think that I am least inferior to those super apostles. I may indeed be untrained as a speaker, but I do have knowledge, and we have made this perfectly clear to you in every way. Was it a sin for me to lower myself in order to elevate you by preaching of the gospel to you free of charge? I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. And when I was with you and needed something, I did not burden anyone. For the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I needed. I have kept myself from being a burden to you in any way, and will continue to do so. As surely as the truth of Christ is in me, nobody in the regions of Achaia will stop this boasting of mine. Why? Because I do not love you. God knows I do. And I will keep on doing what I've been doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal to us in the things that we boast about. Paul talking about, we teach Jesus. Right? That's what we teach. That's our motive. That's what we do. That's how we do. That's our example. And he's cutting the ground out from other ones who wants credits for doing that, but it's obvious they're not. They're doing it for self-motivation. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness, their end will be what their actions deserve. I repeat, let no one take me for a fool, but if you do, then tolerate me just as you would a fool, so that I may do a little boasting. In this self-confident boasting, I am not talking as the Lord would, but as a fool. Since many are boasting in the same way the world does, I will boast too. You gladly put up with fools, since you are so wise. So now he's poking them here. Now pay attention to this next sentence. You gladly put up with fools, since you are so wise. In fact, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you or exploits you or takes advantage of you or puts on airs and slaps you in the face. That's how smart they are. You're putting up with this garbage. You know the truth. But yet you are willing to entertain the world for some mysterious reason. What's going on? So then it says, to my shame, I admit that we are weak for that. Whatever anyone else dares to boast about, I'm speaking as a fool, as I also dare to boast about it. And so now Paul does his comparisons. Apparently, the smooth talkers, they've been comparing themselves to Paul and how much better they are. And this is how Paul does his comparison. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to be talking like this. I am more. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequent, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I have received the Jews' 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I've been beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent the night and the day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from the rivers, in dangers from the bandits, in dangers from my fellow Jews, in dangers for the Gentiles, in dangers in the city, in dangers in the country, in dangers in the sea, in dangers of false believers. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face the daily pressure of my concern for all the churches. Isn't that interesting? He contrasts all these physical hardships. This has happened to me, this has happened, all this for me wanting to be the teacher. But then he throws in one thing as though for him, and you think about for us and what we deal with, the mental strain. And the mental strain is, besides all this, I face the daily pressure of my concern for all of the churches. Yeah, there's physical stuff, but let me tell you what's killing me. All the concerns, I teach, and these false teachers come in behind me. And I'm concerned for the souls. Talk about the anguish. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and the Father of Lord Jesus, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the governor under the king Aretas had the city of Damascus guarded in order to arrest me. But I was lowered in a basket from a window and in a wall and slipped out through his hands. Wow. Talk about a comparison. Paul's comparisons are the things that he's endured to be faithful. Right? We all go through hardships. We all go through difficult situations. We're faced with things in this world that just pierce us to the soul. And through all those, our call is to remain faithful. You're not going to understand everything. You're not going to feel contentment in all things, because we're human and we all hurt, right? We all hurt. We all have disappointments. We all have individual regrets. We know we could have done X better or that better or whatever. But the key is that as we go through these hardships, as Paul says, where was his faith? What did Paul lean into? He leaned into God through all of his physical discomforts, his emotional discomforts, his spiritual discomforts. He leaned into God, and that's where his faith is. And so, I guess I got one question for you. I had a bunch, but we're just going to go after one. I'm going to do two. Who do we compare ourselves to? Or what do we compare ourselves to? If you're looking to compare yourself against the physical, you can always be highly successful. But it will not, because you can find someone who's a little bit more of a dirty, rotten skunk. Right? Okay, maybe they're not dirty, but they're still a skunk. Right? And that's okay. Right? Because you can still find a skunk. Right? Or maybe some of us need to compare ourselves to the dirty, rotten skunk. I don't know. But that's not what it's about. It's about to the Scriptures. That's where we go. We go to the Scriptures. And then what we know is we come up short. But what is the answer to coming up short? It's Jesus Christ. Right? And so my next question that we're going to close on today is, how do you factor in God's instructions to your lives. You folks, your Sunday morning Bible class, you've been sitting in pews for anywhere from 50 to, I'm not going to take the other end. You've been sitting in pews for quite a while, right? And you've got this knowledge. But how has it factored into who you are, what you think, how you react? And every day we get a new choice to decide to implement it even more. Do you? Do I? I get to choose. You get to choose. We all get to choose. Thoughts or questions? All right. Thank you very much.